Vande Mataram.
Good afternoon, welcome to Midday Prime. I'm Amritpal Singh. Over the next 1 hour, we bring you all the stories and updates from India and around the world. We'll update you about the happenings in the world of business and sports and get you some interesting stories that are making the headlines. And the big news of the day today, the United States of America completed its withdrawal with its last flight out of Kabul. We'll talk about that and much more for the next 1 hour. Let's begin with the big news we are tracking at this hour. Prime Minister Narendra Modi directs a high-level group of External Affairs Minister, National Security Advisor and senior officials on to figure out the immediate priorities of India and Afghanistan, issues pertaining to the safe return of stranded Indians. The travel of Afghan nationals, especially minorities, to India being prioritized. The group assures that Afghan territory is not to ensure that it is not used in any manner directed against India. U.S. completes withdrawal of its military presence in Afghanistan after 20 years as the last of the American evacuation planes take the flight out of Kabul airport. The U.S. shifts its Afghani diplomatic mission to Qatar. Indian Paralympics continues to shine in Tokyo. Singaraj Adhana wins the bronze medal in the men's 10-meter air pistol SH1 event. With this, India has the best ever medal haul of 8 medals in Paralympics. 9 judge designates administered the oath of office by Chief Justice of India. It's the first time that 9 judges take the oath of office in one go. The strength of the Supreme Court rises to 33. Assam flood situation worsens. Over 3.63 lakh people affected, 950 villages affected in the state. Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks to Assam Chief Minister Hemanta Biswa Sarma and assures all possible support from the centre to help mitigate the situation. National vaccination mission crosses 64 crore landmark. Himachal Pradesh becomes the first state in the country to complete 100% first dose vaccination of all adults. Schools to reopen partially in Delhi and Meghalaya from tomorrow. And let's begin with the big news of the hour. Well, in view of the evolving situation in Afghanistan, Prime Minister has directed that a high-level group comprising of External Affairs Minister, the National Security Advisor and other senior officials will focus on the immediate priorities of India. The group has been meeting regularly over the last few days. It is seized of issues pertaining to the safe return of stranded Indians, the travel of Afghan nationals to India, assuring that the territory of Afghanistan is not used in any manner for terrorism directed against India. The group has been monitoring the ground situation in Afghanistan and international reactions, including the resolution passed this morning by the UN Security Council. And now for the latest from Afghanistan, the U.S. military has completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan to end a brutal 20-year war which has been America's longest. It started and ended with the hardline Taliban coming back in part despite billions of dollars spent trying to rebuild the conflict-racked country. The withdrawal came after the 4th final days of frantic mission to evacuate tens of thousands of Americans and Afghans who had helped the US-led war effort and which left scores of Afghans and 13 US troops dead in a suicide attack last week. The attack, claimed by ISIS's Afghan offshoot, gave edgy urgency to the risky US-led international airlift from Kabul and also revealed possible troubles ahead for Afghanistan as the Taliban move to form a government and actually rule the country. The withdrawal was announced by General Frank McKenzie, the commander of the U.S. Central Command, who told a Pentagon briefing that the chief U.S. diplomat in Afghanistan, Ross Wilson, was on the last C-17 flight out of Kabul.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans. The last C-17 lifted off from Hamid Karzai International Airport on August 30th this afternoon at 3:29 p.m. East Coast time, and the last manned aircraft is now clearing the airspace above Afghanistan. Tonight's withdrawal signifies both the end of the military component of the evacuation, but also the end of the nearly 20-year mission that began in Afghanistan shortly after September 11, 2001.
And the commander of the U.S. Central Command said that the final flights did not include some dozens of Americans who could not get to the airport.
There's a lot of heartbreak associated with this departure. We did not get everybody out that we wanted to get out. But I think if we'd stayed another 10 days, Louis, we wouldn't have gotten everybody out that we wanted to get out. And there still would have been people who would have been disappointed with that.
The U.S. Army released a photo of Major General Chris Donahue, the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, as he stepped aboard a C-17 transport plane on Monday, making him the last U.S. service member to leave the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the withdrawal from Afghanistan a massive military, diplomatic and humanitarian undertaking and one of the most challenging the U.S. has ever carried out. Talking to media, U.S. Secretary of State vowed after the U.S. military completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan that the Biden administration will keep up relentless efforts to help Americans, Afghans and others leave the country if they choose to do so.
Now, U.S. military flights have ended, and our troops have departed Afghanistan. A new chapter of America's engagement with Afghanistan has begun. We will continue our relentless efforts to help Americans, foreign nationals, and Afghans leave Afghanistan if they choose. We've thus far received confirmation that about 6,000 have been evacuated or otherwise departed. This number will likely continue to grow as our outreach and arrivals continue.
And Blinken said that the U.S. will only engage with the Taliban government if it is in our vital national interest. Blinken said that Washington will not work with the Taliban on the basis of trust or faith, but on what it does with respect to its commitments for free travel for Afghans, protecting the rights of different groups, including women, and preventing terror groups from gaining stronghold.
We will hold the Taliban to its pledge to let people freely depart Afghanistan. The Taliban is committed to let anyone with proper documents leave the country in a safe and orderly manner. We will stay focused on counterterrorism. The Taliban has made a commitment to prevent terrorist groups from using Afghanistan as a base for external operations that could threaten the United States or our allies, including Al-Qaeda and the Taliban's sworn enemy, ISIS-K.
So how did the war, a 20-year war, America's longest war, play out in Afghanistan? If we look at the timeline, it all began on September 11, 2001, when the Al-Qaeda brought down the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center in New York by attacking what are called the 9/11 attacks. Well, on September 18, the Taliban government in Afghanistan refused to hand over Osama bin Laden and other top Al-Qaeda leadership to the United States when the U.S. was hunting for them. On October 7, 2001, the American and British forces jointly attacked Afghanistan and the Taliban, who were then ruling Afghanistan. In November 2001, Taliban forces began to crumble and retreat from their strongholds across the country, including from Kabul. So by that time, Kabul had fell. It was in December 2001 that the Taliban is understood to have surrendered completely. Mullah Omar was in Kandahar. He flew Kandahar, and that is widely believed when the Taliban government in Afghanistan fell, and entering Afghan government was sworn in. In 2003, the then U.S. Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, announced the end to major combat in Afghanistan. About 8,000 U.S. troops were in Afghanistan at that point in time. It was in October 2004, the first elections were held since the fall of the Taliban. 80% of Afghanistan's voting population cast their ballot for Hamid Karzai, and that's when Hamid Karzai became the president of Afghanistan. It was in 2005 the global resurgence of Taliban began, and with that there was increase in violence across the country. In Afghanistan, IED blasts were being held by the Taliban, and they became a routine occurrence in Afghanistan. In 2009, the then U.S. President Barack Obama announced that he's increasing military presence in Afghanistan to about 68,000 troops, because at that time the Taliban had escalated the war. It was in November 2009 that Hamid Karzai was sworn in as the president again for another term, following an election which was of course marred by fraud allegations and things like that, but Hamid Karzai came into power the second time. And in 2010, the number of American deaths crossed the 1,000 mark. Now that was when the debate started within the NATO allies that should they go back or stay there. In November 2010, NATO members signed a declaration stating they will hand over the responsibility for maintaining peace and security to Afghan security forces by the end of 2014. Well, in 2011, on May 1st, 2011, Osama bin Laden was killed by U.S. forces in Abbottabad in Pakistan. And it was the same very year in June, President Obama, the then U.S. President, announced to withdraw 30,000 troops from Afghanistan by 2012. It was in 2013 that NATO handed over control of security to the Afghan forces. The coalition forces started focusing on military training and counter-terrorism in the region. Taliban and the US started talking to each other in Doha in Qatar. And in September 2013, Ashraf Ghani was elected the president of Afghanistan. On December 28, 2013, US and NATO formally ended their combat mission in Afghanistan. They said our combat mission is over. In 2017, but US dropped a massive GBU-43 bomb dubbed as the mother of all bombs in eastern Afghanistan. It was in 2019 that the US ramped up peace negotiations with Taliban in Doha. Taliban promised to block international terrorist groups from operating in Afghanistan in exchange for US withdrawing its troops. And it was in 2020 that the US and the Taliban signed an agreement paving the way for foreign troops to be significantly withdrawn from Afghanistan. And on April 14, 2021, Joe Biden, the US President, announced that US forces will withdraw unconditionally by September 11th. It was in July this year that the US troops abruptly pulled out of their main base at the Bagram airfield, which is about 60 kilometers north of Kabul. Now that was a major turning point. On August 15, 2021, the Taliban stormed into Kabul. President Ashraf Ghani flees the country. The United States and Western allies launch an emergency, urgent airlift from Kabul airport to bring out the citizens and tens of thousands of Afghans who aided them. Many countries, including India, started the airlift then. And on August 26, this year, the Islamic State launched a suicide bomb attack on crowded gates of Kabul airport, killing scores of civilians and 13 US troops. On August 30th, that's yesterday, US General Frank McKenzie announced the completion of the US troop withdrawal. So that's how the Americans took the first flight back home, and the 20-year-old war, the longest American war, ended in Afghanistan. And to talk more about that, I'm joined by Major General S.B. Astana, a strategic and defense expert, and also by my colleague Ravi Dhiman, who I'll talk about to understand the developments. General Astana, first to you. Now that the Americans have taken the last flight back home, how does that augur for the security situation in Kabul?
As far as security situation in Kabul is concerned, it will remain disturbed because there is a conglomeration of large number of terror groups, and now the distribution of power, the power sharing, as well as the distribution of areas of control, that will start. So in those negotiations, there may be certain heartburns and there can be problems.
Okay.
As far as your story regarding the 20 years war is concerned, let me also add a few points onto that. There is no doubt that their entry into Afghanistan was to hunt for Osama bin Laden and for the Al-Qaeda who did the 9/11 attack. That seems to be justified to some extent. Having completed the removal of the Taliban government and having killed Osama bin Laden, had they gone back, it would have been a very graceful withdrawal. Being there after that duration, after Osama bin Laden was killed, and presuming that they will train an army and that army will be able to hold on, there I think they made certain strategic errors. Now, the biggest strategic error was speaking to Taliban that legitimized Taliban. And after 20 years, they have actually replaced Taliban with the Taliban. And because of the legitimized Taliban fighting against a tired United States, and also this legitimized Taliban was also being held by Pakistan, which was also double gaming United States. Now that was the second error, wherein the support of United States was ignored and support of Pakistan was ignored and Pakistan was never punished. And one of their concern was basically the logistic support was via Pakistan because they had no other route considering their relations with Iran. So this was the second error. The third mistake was that when they thought that perhaps Taliban will be able to, Afghan forces will be able to hold on, and withdrawal is a very planned operation, it's a very specific operation and a complex operation. It requires time. I think their assessment went wrong to say that perhaps Afghan forces will be able to hold on for another 6 months and they can have an orderly withdrawal. So they could not have an orderly withdrawal, and at the end, perhaps the way they have left, it will haunt the US reputation for a long time to come. Now coming back to the state of Afghanistan, the people are not too confident of Taliban's promises. Taliban of this time is slightly smarter in terms of diplomacy and media warfare. They are making every kind of right promises which the whole world wants to listen. But at the same time, at the grassroots level, their fighters do not want anything short of Sharia law, and those promises are being broken on daily basis. in a manner that the moment they entered Kabul, they released the ISKP leader, and thereafter we know what happened with the ISKP, and they launched the infamous attack in the airport, killing 3 US soldiers and almost about 200 odd other
yes.
people. So the problem is that they all are the same, but Taliban is smart enough to play good cop, bad cop game in a manner that they want US out. ISKP also wants US out. So ISKP has done whatever it has done. It has owned it up, and Taliban has condemned it. But at the end of the day, the fact that despite Taliban being in control of Kabul, a terror attack did take place against United States means that the first basic presumption that my territory will not be used by any terror groups is it is out of the window.
Okay.
Second thing is Haqqani network being in charge of security of Kabul. Now we know Haqqani is a UN designated terror organization, Haqqani network. So obviously that claim also, I think we will have to see as to whatever they have promised, although UNSC has also given their resolution, so we will have to perhaps wait and see a little more on this.
Okay. Okay. So if Haqqani plays that such an important role as we know it, the Haqqani network does, how does that augur for India? Because we should be rather concerned about now the Americans have left. They must have secured their interest to the extent possible they could. In fact, let me bring in my colleague Ravi Dhiman. Ravi, the Prime Minister has formed a group which consists of the National Security Advisor, the External Affairs Minister, and has tasked them with looking at the situation of the developing situation in Afghanistan and how India's priorities and interests can be taken care of, how to see that Afghanistan is not used for terror attacks against India. How does this group wish to function? What details can you share with us?
Well, as the press release, as the sources tell us, the group has already been working for the past few days. Given the ever-changing situation in Afghanistan for the past few days, the priority of Americans was in no doubt. They wanted their people out, and the NATO allies wanted their own citizens and people who had worked with their security forces out of Afghanistan. That means India had to initiate its own channels to ensure that the citizens who are still in Afghanistan will be given a safe passage to the airport. And now that the airport is in hands of the Taliban and the chartered flights should resume in a few days, India will have the task to actually assure and ensure that the Indian citizens will be allowed to move towards the airport, and once at the airport they will be allowed to board the flights back home. Apart from that, the other challenge for India and concern for India is the minorities of Hindus and Sikhs who want to leave Afghanistan and come to India. India has already brought in some minority people from Afghanistan, including Hindus and Sikhs, and Guru Granth Sahib also, Swarup also were brought in from Afghanistan. So, that also remains a priority, to give shelter and bring the Afghan minorities who maybe will face persecution.
Yes, Ravi, bringing the Afghans,
persecution.
Yeah, absolutely, bringing the Afghans who wish to come here, especially the minorities or the Indian citizens who have not been able to come back. But the fact remains, Ravi, that we do not have any presence in Afghanistan, any diplomatic presence in Afghanistan. You may have had former assets working there. And how do you get them here? By talking to the Taliban. The Taliban has to give them free passage. So are you then suggesting the Indians are already talking to the Taliban behind the scenes?
Well, if you recall, Amritpal, when the first contingent was brought to India, including the Indian ambassador to Afghanistan and the embassy officials, By that time, Kabul had fallen to Taliban, and Taliban had directed checkposts at various places, especially on the roads leading to the airport. Even then, the Indian contingent had to pass through at least 7 to 8 checkpoints, and the Indian contingent was allowed to proceed towards the airport, from where they boarded flight first to Dushanbe and then from there to Delhi. Not one but many flights were operated by the Indian Air Force and the Indians there. So we have our own assets. This is beyond doubt, because by that time Kabul was in the hand of Taliban, except the airport. Getting our people from the Indian embassy to the airport itself was a challenging task, which was done with absolute panache and we can say finesse. But now it is beyond doubt that if we have to get our citizens out from Kabul, the entire Kabul, including the airport, is in the hand of Taliban. So we'll have to open up some diplomatic channel there.
All right. Ravi, request you to stay on. I'll come back to journalist Thana also. I'll request journalist Thana to stay on. Well, the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki has meanwhile said that some 6,000 Americans have been evacuated from Afghanistan so far. Psaki in a media briefing said that Biden administration is still trying to determine how many Americans are left in the country who want to leave ahead of now that the Americans have pulled out.
The initial assessment, if we go back to August 14th, was that there were fewer than 6,000 Americans in Afghanistan who wanted to get out. So as we conveyed at the time, we knew that there could be an option, one, that people who had registered had already departed, or that people had registered had not deregistered, or that there would be additional people who came forward. And we believe there are still a small number.
And the United Nations Security Council has meanwhile undertaken the current presidency, with the current presidency of India, has adopted a resolution on the situation in Afghanistan. This happened early this morning or late last night, demanding that the war-torn country not be used to threaten or attack any nation or shelter terrorists. In an emergency meeting, the UNSC called on the Taliban to honor its commitments to allow Afghans and foreign nationals to leave the country.
As Afghanistan enters the next chapter, it is imperative that the international community remain unified and resolute, including in holding the Taliban accountable for its commitments. One such commitment which the Taliban has made publicly and privately is that those who wish to leave Afghanistan will be able to do so. Today's resolution signals just how seriously the Security Council takes that commitment, along with the commitments to allow humanitarian aid to flow and prevent terrorism.
The resolution was put forward by the United States, the United Kingdom and France. It was adopted after 13 council members voted in favor, while permanent members Russia and China abstained from voting. The resolution also calls for unhindered humanitarian access and that the human rights of women and minorities are protected.
We're not in a place yet where we are prepared to recognize the Taliban. They haven't even formed a government yet. So we need to see what kind of government they form. We insist that that government be inclusive and that it allows for the participation of women and that it takes into consideration as it forms itself the rights of all Afghans, including minorities. So we will see what kinds of actions they take before any decisions are made about recognition.
And Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla was chairing the UNSC meet under the Indian presidency in which the resolution on Afghanistan was adopted. Talking to media, Shringla said that the resolution is very positive development and it especially supports women and minorities.
This resolution also highlights the importance of upholding human rights, in particular in the case of women, children and minorities. India has always provided a very strong support to minority communities in Afghanistan, in particular the Sikh and Hindu minority communities. And it is an important part of our effort to try and bring those Afghan nationals, including minorities, who want to leave Afghanistan, and evacuate them. And I think the resolution in that sense has indicated a need for developing a safe zone for the passage of travelers in and out of Kabul airport, which is indeed a very positive development.
And Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said that his country is committed to bringing the people out from Afghanistan for many years to come. Australia stopped evacuation flights from Afghanistan on Friday after the Islamic State suicide attack killed scores of civilians and US military personnel in an attack outside the airport in Kabul. Earlier in August, Australia agreed to allocate at least 3,000 humanitarian places to Afghan nationals.
This will go on for many years, that we will bring people out from Afghanistan for many years to come, and it's a key issue amongst the Five Eyes partners and coalition partners more broadly, who are all seeking to do the same thing, and we work together, we work with the international agencies to that end. Afghanistan is a place where the situation is deteriorating. As you know, the United States has now completed their mission there, and so they move into the same phase as Australia does, as does the United Kingdom and many other countries. So we work together to continue to provide as many people who we've worked with closely the opportunity for a new life in Australia under those official arrangements.
And with me is Major General S.B. Asthana and also my colleague Ravi Dhiman to talk about the developments in Afghanistan. General Asthana, the UNSC might keep passing resolutions after resolutions. Does that cut ties with the Taliban? Do they really care, given the divisions between within the Security Council? We know the Russians, the Chinese did not vote for the resolution. The Taliban realize, how geopolitics plays. Do they care for the resolutions where you might saying it, bring in a representative government, have a safe zone, allow Afghans to come out, uphold humanitarian values, or they'll do what they do?
Initially, they will force to care for the resolution for the simple reason because they don't have money, and if they show signs that they don't care for resolution, their money will get choked, and it will be very difficult for them to govern. So their first priority is to get the government in place, get the recognition, and get the global acceptance, and through that get their money released, whether from the United States or from IMF and from others. So that is their first priority. So for that, even if they have to speak some lies, they don't mind that.
Okay.
Otherwise, as far as Taliban is concerned, there are certain, we can read between the lines of their statements. The first one which says is that, okay, all foreign nationals with valid travel documents will be allowed. I don't think there should be much of problem in that. But people of Afghan origin, they don't want them to go out.
Right.
Because they say that we are taking our talent out, it will be difficult for us to run the services. And also they are saying that the minorities, because I remember asking a question to them, that what about the minority and the people who want to go out? They said, no, the minorities are safe here, they must stay here, why should they go out? So apparently, they are not looking at allowing the Afghan people to go out after they have resumed the control of the exit. As far as the safe zone is concerned, I'm sure the airport will be a safe zone, and I think they will be able to give a secure passage to a number of foreign nationals who are on a temporary basis there and who have all the valid travel documents to go abroad and who do not have the nationality of Afghans. So that is what I visualize as far as their promises of evacuation is concerned. Now, as far as the promise of the support to the terror groups, export of terrorism and support to terror groups striking outside, what I visualize is Taliban will continue to support, but it will plead deniability. Whenever, let's say hypothetically, if ETM attacks Xinjiang or does something in Xinjiang, they will say we don't know, they have not done it from here and we don't support them. Similarly, if PTP fires at Pakistanis, they will say do the same thing. Similarly, JEM training will continue when they come here in Kashmir area and get inside and try to get inside with the weapons which certain modern weapons. They will say deniability that no, I have not given, I have not done anything.
Okay.
Like that. This is what I usually.
All right, so that remains a cause of concern. Ravi, before I let you go, how big is a concern? Is it now a concern for India, especially in the context of Kashmir?
Well, that concern remains, Amrit, because you see, when the Taliban were sweeping over Afghanistan on their way to Kabul, they were winning one city after another, and the Afghan government forces was just falling by wayside. It was reported by many news agencies that active cadres of terror organizations of Pakistan like LET and JEM were participating in this fight with them. They had tacit support of a Pakistani establishment, and that raises concerns in Indian quarters also, because now, as we have experienced before, the battle-hardened Afghan terrorists can make their way to create trouble in Kashmir, and that remains a concern for India. And that is perhaps why in every resolution of the United Nations Security Council, we have stressed this point while we can during our presidency, that Afghanistan and its land should not be used for fomenting terror outside in other countries, and should not be a breeding ground for terrorists. And it should not, we have stressed that it should not be used as a launching pad on terror attacks in other countries.
All right, Ravi Dhiman, Major General SB Astana, many thanks for joining us. That's all the time we have for and putting things in perspective. We're heading for a short commercial break. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.
With the world's largest COVID vaccination drive, India is leading the way. As the vaccine reaches every corner of the nation, do not forget the mantra, Dawai bhi, Kadai bhi. Let's continue our fight against COVID-19. Vaccination along with social distancing, sanitization and masks.
Mask up, India!
Put your mask on and cover your nose and be safe.
Mask up, India.
Welcome back, and it's time for our stories from the world of sports. And to talk more about what's happening in the world of sports, I'm joined by my colleague Deepika. Deepika, it's over to you.
Good afternoon, Amritpal, and let's start with the biggest update from Tokyo Paralympics, where India is showcasing its best ever performance with a record number of medals in its kitty so far. First up, Indian shooter Singraj Adhana finished with the bronze medal in the P1 men's 10-meter air pistol SH1 final at the Tokyo Paralympics. China's Zhao Jiang and Seng Wong won gold and silver respectively. Singraj's total score in the final was 216.8, which saw him finish in the third position to add to India's medal tally a bronze. Singraj had scored 569 points to finish 6th in the 60-shot qualifying cycle. The bronze medal now takes India's total medal tally at the ongoing Paralympic Games to 8 medals. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has congratulated Singraj Adhana for winning bronze medal in the Tokyo Paralympic Games. In a tweet today, the Prime Minister said, and I quote him here, "Exceptional performance by Singraj Adhana. India's talented shooter brings home the coveted bronze medal. He's worked tremendously hard and achieved remarkable successes. Congratulations to him and best wishes for the endeavours ahead," unquote. Paralympic bronze medal winner Singraj Adhana dedicates his medal to the nation. He further says he is thankful to his coaches, Sports Authority of India and Paralympic Committee of India.
लोगों के प्यार की बदौलत अपने परिवार के आशीर्वाद और सहयोग और बंसी वाले की कृपा से आज मैं कामयाब हो गया हूँ पैरालंपिक में ब्राउन मेडल लेने के लिए। इसमें आप सबका ही मैं एहसानमंद हूँ, अपने टीम का, अपने कोचेज़ का और अपने पीसीआई का और साई का, जिन स्पोर्ट्स नीति के बदौलत हम यहाँ तक पहुँचे हैं। मैं आप सबको हार्दिक शुभकामना देना चाहता हूँ। ये जीत मेरी नहीं है बल्कि आप सबकी जीत है। भारत माता की जय।
Singraj Adhana's family celebrated at their home in Faridabad after he won a bronze medal at Tokyo Paralympics.
से बच्चों की वजह से भाई मुझे मेरे लड़के ने कम से कम मेडल तो लिया और आने वाले समय में भी जो 50 मीटर रह रहा है, मैं कामना करता हूँ वो कम से कम और मेडल देगा।
हाँ, मेरे को बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है मेडल को देख के और उनकी जो मेहनत है वो सफल हुई। तो अभी उनका एक और इवेंट रह रहा है तो उसमें हमें गोल्ड की उम्मीद है।
आज इस खुशखबरी को मैं बयान नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ कि आज हमारे भाई ने सिर्फ हमारा घर का परिवार का नाम नहीं, पूरे समाज का नहीं, इस देश का नाम विश्व स्तर पर किया है।
The medal haul at both the Olympics and Paralympic Games in Tokyo are now India's best ever tallies at the world's most competitive sporting event. However, these results have not been delivered overnight. They are a result of hard work of not only the sports persons, coaches and support staff, but of the entire sports administration as well as the government at multiple fronts. Target Olympic Podium Scheme is one such effort. Here's more.
With recording its best ever performance in Tokyo Olympics, Team India is now creating new records in the ongoing Tokyo Paralympics 2020 as well. The Indian contingent has already broken the record of Rio Paralympics 2016 with bagging a total number of 7 medals till date in the ongoing Paralympics event. India bagged a total of 4 medals in Rio Paralympics, which has been comfortably surpassed at the ongoing event. Achieving the current feat was not at all easy for the Indian contingent, however. Consistent support kept them striding forward with grit and determination. One such scheme that plays a vital role in the development of athletes is the Target Olympic Podium Scheme or TOPS. To improve India's performance in the Olympic and Paralympic Games, the Sports Ministry launched the Target Olympic Podium Scheme in September 2014. Under the TOPS scheme, players who are in the core group are given 50,000 rupees as monthly allowance, whereas players who are in the development group are given an amount of 25,000 rupees as monthly allowance. Currently, there are 162 athletes in the core group, whereas 254 athletes along with the hockey team have been included in the development group. The scheme helps the players to streamline their coaching requirements and other equipments meant for their training purpose. In addition to this, financial assistance is also given to players who are participating in Olympic and Paralympic Games. The scheme not only facilitates players with financial help, but also helps them with the availability of support staff such as physiotherapists and physical trainers to maintain their fitness for various events. If we look at the figures under the top scheme, the government spent rupees 14.31 crore in 2018-2019, rupees 12.41 crore in 2019-20, rupees 15.65 crore in 2020-2021 and rupees 12.48 crore has been spent in 2021-22 till August 4th.
हमने 5-6 वर्षों में कुछ करने का प्रयास किया है, टॉप जैसी स्कीम को चलाया है, एलीट एथलीट को देश विदेश में ट्रेनिंग दी है। बहुत सारे एथलीट्स को तो 300, 400 दिन विदेशों में ट्रेनिंग मिली, 1,000 दिन देश के अंदर ट्रेनिंग मिली। So training any athlete for 400 days overseas or 1,000 days within the country was not an easy task, but the government of India is hand-holding, the SAI is hand-holding the athletes and will keep doing so.
The support that we are getting from SAI, Ministry, see, it's a collective effort, as I said. As coach, definitely he is putting a lot of effort on Shaili, and he is giving precise training for her, and he is giving target each day and for each training, and she is able to cope up with that. See, this is it's a rolling kind of thing.
Apart from this, the government has also formed Mission Olympic Cell that works under the Sports Authority of India. The role of this cell is to identify and support the athletes selected under the top scheme. The idea of the Mission Olympic Cell is to debate, discuss and decide the processes and methods so that the athlete receives best assistance. The Mission Olympic Cell also focuses on selection, exclusion and retention of athletes, coaches, training institutes that can receive TOPS assistance. With such schemes, the government is working at the grassroots level to identify talents and help them develop in the sporting landscape. The improved medal tally at Tokyo Olympics with record 7 medals and the ongoing performance of Tokyo Paralympics is a result reflecting the support and strategy put behind the athletes through these schemes by the government. Sports Desk, DD India.
And to take the winning momentum forward, we are now joined by Mr. Surjit Singh, former Paralympian, and who also won a bronze medal in Athens Paralympics. Thank you, Mr. Singh, for joining us, and a very good afternoon. My first question to you is that India has been putting up a brilliant performance this time at Tokyo Paralympics, and so was the case in Tokyo Olympics as well. Whereas the government has also been consistently supporting through schemes like Target Olympic Podium Scheme. Your thoughts?
The government has really come forward for all the participating athletes, and they are going into the group grassroots level. They are finding the athletes at a very young age, and they are training, and the total government support towards the development of para sports and able-bodied sports. And the government has now really come out with beautiful schemes where athletes are getting all the benefits, and they are also getting motivated, whereas the athletes also are really getting into the pick and bringing the good name to the country. The government support is very important, especially Sports Authority of India. They are giving all the special benefits to the sports athletes so that they can participate in a better way, and they get all the facilities, whatever is needed. Even the smallest thing is taken care of by the government. So
Absolutely.
Sports Authority of India, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, our sports ministry, everybody are really giving it 100% so that our country gets good laurels and name to the nation.
Absolutely. Mr. Singh, the Prime Minister also talked with the athletes before the Paralympics even began. How important does it become when we talk about the players' mental health, and especially considering the pandemic?
Especially our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi ji, is really interested in sports, and more than anything, he personally gets into the interaction along with the athletes, where the athlete is really motivated and he really will give it everything so that our country gets the medal, and the results are really seen. Mr. Modi ji individually speaks to the athlete whenever that bringing the laurels to the country, and before going, this was the first time in the history of all the sports meets, the Prime Minister met each and every athlete and wished them all the best, and this was a great initiative which was needed much before, which is now started, and hope everything continues the same way. And Mr. Modi ji is really into it, and he is trying to bring each and everything, and we are going to get much more medals in this Paralympics itself. Our badminton event has not started. Today we have the high jump event, which is scheduled at 3:30. We are expecting 2 to 3 medals here itself, because the world's best high jumpers in that particular class are with India.
Absolutely. Can you please tell our viewers more about today's event where Mariyappan Thangavelu, Sharad Kumar and Varun Singh Bhati, all three of them have been medalists. How are they going to perform?
No, Sharad has not won an Olympic medal, but all the three are equally good. Mariyappan has got the edge, and I am hoping that Mariyappan may do better, because the last time Olympic he had jumped the height of 1.89. and the world record is 1.96 meters. I think he is aiming to clear that world record this time, because one world record is already broken by Sumit, and we are expecting another world record to happen. Maybe Sharath also has performed really well. He's also put all the efforts, and Varun Bhati, really, that man missed the medal last time because his silver medal, the jump was same, but he did it in the second jump, so he missed the silver medal. I hope Varun Bhati also should do well, and all the 3 medals in the high jump I am expecting should come to India.
Absolutely. Another medal on the cards today on day 7. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for joining us on Midday Prime. And moving on, Andy Murray produced his finest display in 4 injury-disrupted years, but fell agonizingly short of beating Greek world number 1 Stefanos Tsitsipas in a thrilling start to the US Open. The British former world number 1 played in a manner reminiscent of his best as he led by 2-1. But Tsitsipas fought back to win by 2-6, 7-6, 3-6, 6-3 and 6-4 in New York. Dan Evans is the only Briton through after defeats for Heather Watson, Harriet Tart and Cameron Norrie. Defending champion Naomi Osaka claimed a straight-set victory at the US Open on her first Grand Slam appearance since withdrawing from the French Open. The Japanese third-seed crowned down Czech world number 87 Mary Boskova for a 6-4, 6-1 first-round win. She will now play world number 145 Olga Donilovic of Serbia next. And that's all we have for now. Amritpal, over to you.
Well, thank you, Deepika, for that. And moving on to our national prime segment now. Well, 9 new judges, including 3 women, were administered the oath of office as judges of the Supreme Court on Tuesday, taking the Supreme Court's total strength to 33. It is for the first time in the history of the Apex Court that 9 judges took the oath of office at one go. Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramanna, administered the oath of office to the new judges in a swearing-in ceremony held in the auditorium of the Supreme Court's additional building complex. With the swearing-in of 9 new judges, the strength of the Supreme Court, as I said, has risen to 33, which includes the CJI, out of the sanctioned strength of 34. The 9 new judges who were administered the oath of office as the Apex Court judges include Justice Abhay Srinivas Oka, Justice Vikram Nath, Justice Jitendra Kumar Maheshwari, Justice Hema Kohli and Justice B.V. Nagaratna. India's glorious freedom struggle is one of the greatest movements in the world, in the modern world has ever witnessed. DD India brings you glimpses of the struggle every day. Today we'll talk about the unsung Bengali revolutionary freedom fighter Kanailal Datta.
Kanailal Datta was born on this day in 1888 in Chandan Nagar of undivided Bengal. He was associated with nationalist Jugantar Group, which was one of the 2 main secret revolutionary organizations operating in Bengal for Indian independence at that time. Kanailal made the ultimate sacrifice for the cause of his motherland at the youthful age of 20 years.
Kanailal Datta was arrested along with at least 40 other revolutionaries by the British in 1908 in connection with the Muzaffarpur bomb attack that aimed to kill the cruel British judge Douglas. He was convicted a few months later along with his friend Satyendranath Bose for the assassination of Narendranath Gosain, a revolutionary turned approver for the British colonial administration.
Gosain's revelations to the British police led to framing of charges against many freedom fighters. Thus, to avenge the revolutionaries, Satyendranath and Kanailal shot Gosain from a revolver smuggled into the prison. Kanailal's statement to the district magistrate about his motive for assassinating Narendranath was touchingly direct and simple. He stated that he indeed killed Narendranath because he was a traitor to the country.
A day before Kanailal's hanging, the British jail warden found Kanailal with a smiling face and retorted that all his smiles would disappear the next day when he would be taken to the gallows. Next morning on the gallows, Kanhai Lal smiled at the warden and asked him about the conversation of the day prior. His fearlessness left the warden speechless. On the morning of November 10, 1908, Kanhai Lal was executed at the Alipur jail in Kolkata.
About 15 years after the death of Kanhai Lal, Motilal Roy published a memorial booklet on Kanhai Lal Datta in Bengali from Chandannagar town, which was under French occupation that time and beyond British jurisdiction. It was immediately banned by the British under Sea Customs Act of 1878, which prohibited any objectionable materials from being transported into British territories. In that book, Motilal recalled the sight of Kanhai Lal's body on the funeral pyre. He said that Kanhai's face had an ascetic calm, and nowhere on his body were there any ugly wrinkle showing the pain of the death.
The execution of Kanhai Lal aroused great commotion in public life, and the witness accounts of his final moments before martyrdom became legend. The nationalistic zeal of Kanhai Lal provided a spark to many great Bengali revolutionaries, including Bagha Jatin, Rash Bihari Bose, Master Das Surya Sen, and his group of nationalist warriors. India is forever indebted to the selfless service and sacrifice of the martyrs like Kanhai Lal Datta.
And that's it then in Midday Prime. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.